Hello and welcome to a video I've been waiting to make for ages. Today we're going to showcase, frankly, one of the best Sudokus I've ever seen. And I've solved a lot of Sudokus over the years, and this is right up there. Why is today the day I'm going to showcase this? Well, I'm pretty proud to say that in a couple of weeks' time we're going to be launching our new classic Sudoku app. So as you guys know, if you've bought our Sandwich Sudoku app, we went to great lengths in that app to create and select puzzles that had something cool about them. The reviews have been, really good, and we've been so delighted that you guys have enjoyed playing our puzzles, and that's what we think is going to happen with this collection as well. This is not a collection of puzzles where you'll be stumbling through a Sudoku and click on a hint button to find out what the next step is, and the machine will say, you needed to use Bowman's bingo at this point. No, we have put together what I think will come to be viewed as the great collection of Sudokus. As always, we've thought hard about the interaction between the solver and the setter. We've play tested these puzzles to death, and that a human being has actually thought about your experience as you go through the puzzles, and that is very valuable. Now, as well as some puzzles by Mark and me, we've also got some treats for you in the app with some special guest compilers. So if you'd like to solve a couple of puzzles by Thomas Snyder, the three-time World Sudoku champion, World Puzzle Champion last year, otherwise known as Dr. Sudoku, well, they're in there. If you want to try some puzzles by Derek Neal, whose innovative solving techniques like the slot machine was so popular on the channel about a few months ago, well, they're in there. And if you want to try some puzzles by Sam Cappleman-Lynes, who is, he's clearly one of the best Sudoku makers in the world today, then they're in there too, and it's one of Sam's puzzles I'm going to be solving in today's video. Other puzzles in the app difficult? Well, as usual, we've got the whole range, starting off relatively easily, and you'll earn stars as you solve the puzzles correctly, and that will give you access to the later puzzles where they do get reasonably challenging. There'll be 40 puzzles on day one, on the day of launch, and as we did with the Sandwich app, there'll be 5 more puzzles released over the first year, so 100 puzzles in all. And we think that represents pretty good value for money. Now, what about Sam's puzzle and why I've chosen it in the context of the app? Well, the reason is that this puzzle, I think, perfectly illustrates that innovation is still possible in the little old world of Sudoku. You could play any other Sudoku app until Kingdom Come, and you would not solve a puzzle like this. It is a thing of elegance and beauty, and I'm going to show you actually. What I'll do is I'll show you the solver, what a computer solver makes of this puzzle. Okay, so here's the puzzle, and I've put it into Andrew Stewart's online solver, which is, I think, probably the best known online solver. And how do I tell how difficult this is? Grader, let's click there we go, grader. Diabolical grade, 1574. Now, I think I'm right in saying that is an extraordinarily high rating. I think we did it once. We put in a sort of super fiendish puzzle from the Times newspaper, and it was about 100 or something. So this is, I don't know how this scale works, but this is monumentally difficult, this puzzle, according to the machine. Okay, so let's look at why I think this puzzle is so very interesting. You can see immediately off the bat, it's got a lovely symmetry down this leading diagonal. In fact, when I first looked at the puzzle, I thought maybe it was a symmetrical placement puzzle. So I started to compare, the symmetrical digits to see if I could see a pattern. Especially, you can see the 2s and the 4s might seem like they're mapping immediately, but in fact, it isn't a complete mapping. And therefore, you can see, for example, let's pick a digit, 6s and the 5s aren't mapping to each, and the 3s and the 5s here. So it's not symmetrical. But then the important thing to note, and this is why I think this puzzle is so, it leads you to the right answer, is to note that there are no 7s, 8s and 9s in this huge yellow area of the grid. And indeed, we can go further than that. We can actually say, whoa, there are no 7s, 8s and 9s, in terms of givens anyway, in all of these squares. Now that is a big chunk of the grid not to have any 7s, 8s and 9s in. And it might get you thinking in the right way to spot the extraordinary thing that Sam has hidden in this puzzle. And we'll start off. I want to focus on 4 rows of the grid. These 4 rows. And I want to think firstly about the number 7. Now we know that each of these rows is going to have to contain a 7, and we haven't managed to put a 7 in yet, so we're going to have to put a 7 somewhere into these 4 rows. Now there's a 7 up here, so in fact the 7 in these 4 rows must be in one of those yellow squares. Hopefully that is clear. Now the interesting thing about it is if we count how many columns we've managed to isolate the 7s into, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So in each of these 4 rows we need to put a 7, and we know that there are only 4 open columns that we can put those 7s into. Now this is called a jellyfish pattern. It is a very, very rare fish in a Sudoku. You might have heard of swordfishes. In fact, we probably see a swordfish on the channel once every 2 or 3 weeks. A jellyfish is a rarer thing altogether, and Sam has managed to include one in this puzzle. So what does it mean when you find this pattern? Well, what it means is it means something for the columns. So let's imagine that we tried to put a 7 in here in the finished solution. Well, because of the jellyfish, this is just not possible. And the reason it isn't possible is, what would the effect of that 7 be? That 7 would mean that we would need to put in each of these 4 rows, we need to put a 7, remember, in somewhere in these 4 rows, but there are only 3 columns left to put the 7 into now. So there would have to end up being a repeated 7 in a column. And obviously there can't be 2 7s in a single column. So this would break the puzzle. You can't have we wouldn't be able to put 7s in any of these columns outside of these 4 rows. So there is an awful lot of eliminations we'd be able to do as a result of this pattern. We couldn't have 7s in any of those squares, I think. I may have missed one, but hopefully you get the idea. So that's the first thing you might notice. Now the next thing is quite extraordinary. Let's try the same thing again with 8s. Where can the 8s go in these 4 rows that we've already spotted a jellyfish on 7s in? Well, you can see we would be able to put an 8 in theory in one of those 4 positions. This 8 here means we can't have an 8 in any of these positions here. Oh, I don't want that one in there, sorry. Let me just get rid of that, otherwise it'll be confusing. So these positions would be valid for an 8, these positions would be valid for an 8, and these positions would be valid for an 8. So we've got 4 rows here, and the 8s are limited, what do you know, to 4 different columns. Not exactly the same columns as the 7s, but well, 3 of the columns are in common. But this means, again, we're not going to be able to have any 8s anywhere else in column 1, anywhere else in column 6, column 8, or column 9. So there is a second jellyfish here. Unbelievable. 2 jellyfish involving the same rows of the grid. And I'm sure you're all spotting it now, but I mean, it is a thing of beauty to me. It is. Let's do the same thing with 9s. same rows again. Where can the 9s go? Well, this column, they could be 9s. This column, they could be 9s. This column, they could be 9s. This 9 here rules out us being able to put 9s into this column. So the only other squares looking at these 4 rows that could contain 9s are these yellow ones on the right hand side. So 4 rows, 4 different columns, another jellyfish, this time on 9s. So 7s, 8s and 9s, there is a jellyfish in relation to rows 3, 4, 5 and 7 in this puzzle, and that is something you just don't see. I mean, it is so startling, and you can get an insight into the way Sam's created the puzzle and his idea behind it if we look at this square. So we now know for sure, because this column here, column 1, appeared in all 3 of those jellyfish. This square cannot have a 7, 8 or a 9 in it. It would be impossible. And look, what else is ruled out from this square? Well, 1's ruled out, 2's ruled out, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 and 9 are ruled out by the jellyfish. That square can only be a 6, which is, I mean, I just think it is just so amazingly clever. I mean, it really, I find it staggering. Now, if we look at this now, I think, knowing Sam and having solved the puzzle before, this square is also seriously restricted. Let's have a look at that square. So again, we know this square can't be a 7, 8 or a 9 because of the jellyfish. What can it be? Well, it could be a 1 actually. It could be a 1. Can't be a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9. So that square is also very restricted. That can only be a 1. Now, if I remember rightly, that 1 is quite powerful. Yeah, that's going to give us an easy number down here because of these 1s. That means there's a 1 there, a 1 there, and a 1 there. So we get a flurry of 1s as a result of this one up here. These 4s mean this is a 4. These 4s now mean that this square must be a 4. Therefore, that square's a 4 because of these 4s there. Pencil mark some 4s up there, look, and down there. Must be a 5 in one of these 2 squares. And, oops, in one of these 2 squares. 5's here. I mean, that can be a 5 now. Therefore, there's a 5 in one of those 2 squares. And we don't get a jellyfish, but we get an X-wing on 5's now. So you can see the 5's are locked into the same 2 rows of the grid in 2 different 3x3 boxes. So in the finished solution, if we saw there was a 5 here, we would know there must be a 5 there. And the only other state of existence that could persist is that the 5 is not here. Now, if the 5 is not here, it must be here, because we know it's in one of these 2 positions. But if this is a 5, that will be a 5. So in either of those situations, it's simply impossible that this square contains a 5. Therefore, there must be a 5 up here. That means that's a 4, that's a 4. Have we done the 5s? No, we haven't quite done all the 5s. We've got what's left. We may have done all the 4s now, I think. But look, because we've got a 4 and a 5 in here now, this row becomes super interesting. Super interesting. See if you can think about why, given what we talked about at the start. So we looked, we were looking at the numbers 7, 8 and 9 and asking where they can go in particular rows and columns of the grid. So let's look at this row and think about where the 7s, 8s and 9s might be able to go. Now, you might remember that in each of those positions we were able to rule out the 7, 8 and 9 because of the jellyfish. So in this square, could we ever have this square where the cursor is, could there ever be a 7, 8 and 9 in those positions? No, because we know the 7, 8 and 9 in this column must be in one of the yellow squares. So in this square, and this square, there is not 7, 8, 9. Now look at the row. There's only 3 positions left now because we got this 4 and 5. These squares have to be 7, 8 and 9 in some order. Now, does that matter? Let's think about those squares. Must therefore be 2, 3 and 6 in some order. That one can't be a 2. That one can't be a 6. That one can't be a 3. Oh, in fact, that square is going to be seriously restricted by the jellyfish as well, because this can't be a 7, 8 or a 9 because of the jellyfish. So what can this be? It can't be 1, 2. Could be a 3. Can't be 4, 5. Can't be 6. Can't be 7, 8 and 9. That square is a 3. Sorry, I should have got that earlier. Now in fact, that square is also a 3. Must be a 3 in one of those squares. Now if we look here, this 7, 8, 9, restricting this cell from being a 3 is now nice with this 3 here, because that means the 3 must be, in fact, in one of those 2 squares, which means this square is the only place for a 3 in this box because of the 3 over there. Now in this column, where can a 3 go? It can't go here, and it can't go here, so it can only go there. And in this central 3x3 box, because this is 7, 8, 9 into these 2 squares, there must be a 2 and a 3 in these squares. So the 3 must be in one of these 2 positions. And there must be a 2, therefore, in one of those 2 squares down here. Now, what can we do next? This 9 means there must be a 9 in one of these 2 squares, and that means there's a 9 up there. Similarly, this 7, there must be a 7 in one of these 2 squares, and therefore there's a 7 down here. There must be a 2 in one of those 2 positions. But this 2 here means this square can't be a 2, so in fact, this is a 2, 7 pair, therefore this square can't be a 2, this square is a 2, that square's a 5, that square's a 5. This must be an 8 now to complete this box, because we know this is a 2, 7 pair. Now there must be an 8 in one of these 2 squares, but can this square ever be an 8? And you might remember that we looked at this. We know there was jellyfish. Those were the only squares in these rows that could contain an 8. Therefore, there is going to be an 8 in one of those squares. Therefore, that one, that's not an 8. That's got to be an 8. That's got to be a 2. That's a 2. That's a 7. There must be a 7 in one of these squares now. Now, surely we can go a bit further. This 6 means there's a 6 in one of those squares. 9, 7, 9. Where can a 6 go in row 9 of the grid? That 6 sorts that out. That must be a 6. Therefore, this is a 9. Therefore, this is a 9. This must be 6 and 7, I think, which must be like that. That must be a 7. That means there's a 7 in one of those 2 squares. 7 here. That means that's a 9, because it could only be a 7, 8, or a 9. This can only be an 8 now, therefore that's a 7. This is an 8. This is a 9. This is a 6. these two squares have got to be 8 and 9, and there's an 8 here, so we get into, I think we're on the home stretch now of, quite simply, one of the very, very finest puzzles you will ever see if you're solving until you're 100 years old. I'm really looking forward to getting your feedback on this puzzle, and hopefully you guys are excited about the fact that we've got this new app coming out. What I'll do is I'll put a link on the channel to the Steam page, so those of you who want to get it on PC or Mac can, I think you can express an interest or something, so that they'll tell you as and when it gets released. 7 here. This square I think has to be a 2, and that resolves everything. Look, 2, 8, 8, 9, 9, and if I haven't made a mistake, it would be criminal if I've made a mistake. I get to put in a 3 there. Check. Wow. So yeah, that's a teaser as what's to come in the app. Sam, some sort of genius. Absolutely incredible puzzle. 3 jellyfish. You don't get that every day. Please let us know what you think of the puzzle, as I say, in the comments, and we'll be back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.